Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, mate. Nice to be here.
Not sure if you know this, but in 10 seconds or less, what is it that you do?
In 10 seconds or less. I'm a online personal trainer, strength and conditioning coach, and nutritionist.
Beautiful. 5 seconds.
That's it. Yeah.
Would you say... Go on.
Sorry. I guess you could stick in there that I'm struggling with the new title, but I guess you could say I'm a YouTuber now. But, it's one of those things. It's like trying to call yourself a nutritionist when you're just qualified.
Yes.
I'm not quite used to the title yet.
And how did you get into this game? How did you get into the world of strength and conditioning, nutrition, etc.?
So I've pretty much been interested in it since I left school. I joined the Air Force, and obviously there's a big physical fitness culture in any military. And I kind of got to the point where I actually got injured and then ended up being 150 kilos at one point because I kept eating like, the superstar rugby player I was. But I was injured and couldn't do anything. So I blew up real fast. And then that was kind of the start of it, because eventually when I kind of realized how big 150 kilos is, I then lost the weight, and I lost a lot of it pretty quickly. I've managed to keep off about 40 kilos for, 10 years now. But during that time, when you lose weight, people are like, oh, how'd you lose weight? And I'm like, well, this is what I did. And people keep asking more questions. And eventually I got to the point where I was like, if I'm going to tell people about this stuff, I should probably learn about it. And so a lot of it came from people I was playing rugby with, and I became a rugby coach to try and, pass on some information with some credibility. And then as I became a rugby coach, I got interested in the strength and conditioning side of things. And people started asking me questions about that. So I actually became a strength and conditioning coach before I was a qualified personal trainer, just because that's how I sort of came into it, through rugby. And again, every time somebody asked me, well, not every time somebody asked me, but once people started asking me the same thing enough, I was like, right, I should probably find out the answer to this for sure. And usually it led to a qualification. When this all started 10 years ago, the internet was around, but there weren't online qualifications like there are now, where you can just, jump onto a stream and watch somebody talk and then boom, you're certified. It was very much, there were points where I lived in the Northern Territory, which is proper outback Australia, and I'd have to fly like 7 hours to get to a city where they're going to run a course that, teaches something I'm interested in. And so basically I just kept learning so that I could, give the information when people asked it, and be confident that I was, pretty right about what I was saying, or at least educated enough to the point where I knew there was enough subtlety there that there wasn't one answer. And I think that's the thing that I learned the longer I got into learning, is that there's never just one answer. Like, it might have worked for me, but it's probably going to be something different that works for you. And yeah, so it kind of just happened by accident. I left Australia in 2014, moved to the UK. And my plan was to continue. I was an engineer in the Air Force, and my plan was to continue doing that. But the aviation authority that governs Australia is different to the one that governs Europe. And it meant having to redo all my qualifications, basically. And I wasn't interested in that. So I kind of was like, right, I'm really interested in, training people and stuff. And, I was working out at gyms, and I ran a marathon, and then had all this spare time that I was, previously marathon training, where I was like, well, I guess I could, start training in that time and maybe helping out other people. And I joined a gym. I was already a member of the gym, but I kind of joined the staff by accident of the gym that I was working out at, because the owner, and it was pretty small, they only had 3 coaches there, but the owner was going on his honeymoon, and it was going to be away for like a month, and they were like really struggling for someone to help out. And I was like, hey, if it's just running classes and stuff, I'm more than happy to get involved. Like, I'd been to every class for like a year at that point, so I pretty much knew the structure and most of the people turning up. And it kind of went from there. Like that was my first true job in the fitness industry, was just running classes because, you know, the coach at my gym was going on his honeymoon. And after that, I got bitten by the bug, and I loved coaching people, and some of the people doing the classes wanted some personal training. And yeah, man, it just kind of whirlwind from there. And again, eventually, once you've been a trainer for long enough, people start asking questions about nutrition. And again, like I knew a fair bit, like I'd done a bunch of my own research, but I wanted to make sure that I was giving the right stuff. So I became qualified in nutrition. And yeah, I mean, I've worked with Olympians, movie stars. I've pretty much done it all now, as far as like the big dogs. And it's something that I really enjoy. But last year I took most of the year to work with those, like, you know, the high paying, high flying clients. And then this year I was like starting to, you know, focus back down into the people who are really needing the stuff and, you know, don't have the money to spend, you know, hundreds and hundreds on nutrition and training. So I thought the YouTube channel was a good idea, because then I can kind of give like a bunch of free information to people who want it, rather than, you know, only focusing on these big clients.
Brilliant. So like rugby was the gateway really, and then things just snowballed from there. Yeah, it's similar to myself. The love of it is where it starts, and then you want to learn more, and you realize you can help people, and then you have a good way with people, and yeah, things progress from there. So I came across you about 2.5 years ago when we met over in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And we said today, what we'll chat about. And I was like, I'm just going to abuse you about being a vegan. Were you vegan back then? I know nothing about your journey with your own nutrition. So yeah, fill us in. When, like, has that always been a thing, or?
So, I mean, as a teenager, I was on and off vegetarian. I mean, as a teenager, it's kind of hard to make your own nutrition decisions. And back then it wasn't about the nutrition. It was purely about, you know, ethics and stuff. But I wasn't buying the food. I wasn't cooking the food. So I was on and off, because eventually mum and dad would get sick of, you know, cooking different meals for me. And they're just like, eat what you're given. So I did. And then you know, once I moved out, again, I was on and off vegetarian for a real long time. And I was kind of falling for the same media hype. You know, you can't gain muscle as a vegetarian and all the stuff, especially, you know, what was this? I'm 32 now. So almost 15 years ago when all this was going on, and there wasn't the information there is now. So, you know, I was trying to join the Air Force and wanted to make sure I was fit and healthy. So I had to eat meat if I wanted to, you know, make sure I was fit and healthy. So yeah, it was kind of on and off. And then, I mean, when we met, I think, yeah, I was vegan before I started MNU. So before we met. But again, I mean, up until then, I mean, it might have been kind of new to me back then. I tried it a few times and again, gone on and off, finding it kind of hard. And eventually I got to the point where I was just like, look, I will eat vegan as much as I can. I find it really hard to use the word vegan because that's not how I would consider myself. But back then, that's how I said it. But yeah, so I was like, I'd eat vegan whenever I can, whenever it's, you know, applicable and it's easy enough to do. And when I couldn't, I would, you know, have the vegetarian alternative. I haven't even eaten meat in like 5 years. But yeah, so I would kind of, every time I found an alternative that was plant-based, I would have the alternative instead of whatever I was having before, until I got to the point where I was pretty much having everything that was plant-based anyway. And I think whey was probably the last thing to go, because vegan protein, especially back then, it's getting better now, but it kind of sucks. And like now there's some great versions out there, but back then having that grainy texture right after a workout or, you know, for breakfast or whatever, just wasn't something I was interested in. And I got to the point where I was like, look, it's the last thing to go. I may as well just, you know, have something that doesn't taste great, but fits more within my ethics. And it came down to an ethical decision to just kind of crack it off and make the change more permanent. And I mean, I'm not the perfect plant-based eater. That's why I would say more plant-based now, because You know, there are times where I'll go out for dinner with the missus or something and there's not a vegan option, and so I just have the vegetarian option and that sort of thing. So
Yeah. You don't make
yeah.
you don't make a big deal of it, like, because when I had lunch and dinner with you a few nights, like a few days, and I don't even think I was aware. You know, not that I'd be fucking analyzing your meal or anything like that, but you know, some people like to make a big song and dance about the fact that they're vegan or vegetarian, or you know, they have these subtle ways where like, oh look, I'm having vegan, and I can't help but think like, oh, you're just doing that because you think it's better for fat loss, or you think it's better for health, or so. Would I be right in saying that you're doing this from an ethics standpoint?
Yeah, 100% an ethics thing. And, you know, when it gets to the point that they have lab-grown meat, I'll probably go back to eating. I mean, I say that. I've always said I'd eat meat if it was lab-grown, or if it was, you know, if they started making like insect protein a thing, like I'd probably start eating that, because, I mean, you know, where they say, where do you draw the line? As far as I'm concerned, insects is on the plant side of that line. But, you know, the longer I go without eating meat, the weirder it seems to go back to that, even if it's lab grown. I don't know. I don't know if I'd be keen on the texture and stuff anymore. It's been a while. And like I still eat like Impossible burgers and stuff like that. So I guess the texture wouldn't be that unfamiliar to me. But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely an ethical thing. And if there were more ethical options, I've got to say, I think I would go for them, purely because it'd be easier as well. Like trying to organize your protein intake around, you know, different, you know, complete proteins and incomplete proteins and combining. Like I'm used to it now, but it's still a bit of a ball ache going, oh, I can't have carbs with this because there's carbs in my protein, you know. Thanks legumes for all the protein, but also I get crap ton of carbs with that. And now, you know, I'm just eating bowls of flavored legumes basically. So yeah, it's definitely an ethical thing. And I think if the ethical consideration wasn't there, I'd probably go back to how I used to eat. I think the ethical decision is the only one that's involved anyway. Like whether you come at it from an environmental or an animal standpoint, that's still an ethical decision. And, you know, there's arguments to be made that a lot of the environmental decision, like the environmental reasons, aren't even that big anyway. Like if you take beef out of the equation, you know, it's pretty much the same impact on the environment to have tofu as it is to have chicken, for example. And then you come down to, you know, an animal's life, and then it is an ethical decision. Yeah, I mean, I used to get it all the time. I mean, I'm sure you'll ask about game changers, so I won't go too far into this. But a lot of people say, well, what if you take the ethical thing out of it? And I'm like, that's it. And that's the whole thing. Like anyone who says they're doing it for health reasons, like unless they've been specifically directed by a doctor, are doing it for the wrong reason, whether they know it or not. You know, there's a lot of misinformation out there about it as well. It's like any, it's not really a company, but it's kind of a company. Like there's companies out there making money off veganism, and
100%.
And they're perpetuating stories. And there's not just companies, people out there as well. Like there's doctors who have aligned themselves with the vegan message, and you know, people will fly from all over the world to go to these doctors because they have the same ethics as them, and they've got to keep the myth alive as well. And so they do that by, you know, perpetuating these health myths. But when you actually look into it, as far as all the science I've seen, and you know, maybe there's doctors out there that have looked at more nutritional science, but I'd wager to say there's probably not that many doctors out there that have paid attention to nutritional science as much as I have. And it looks like there's no actual health advantage to going plant-based, unless it's been advised by a doctor, like you had, I don't know, cholesterol issues or something like that.
So like is it the Blue Zone studies?
Yeah.
Where it analyzes the certain parts of the world. Is it like the health of the population? I can't remember. It's been a while now since I looked into that. Like, but it was basically showing like the vegans and vegetarians of certain populations weren't as healthy as we were made out to be, or like, but you're right, like the marketing behind pushing vegan stuff, and you even see these little things crop up every now and then, like, oh, this woman is 107, she looks 60 because she eats a vegan diet. You know, it's just like, what is that? Do you know, it's just there's a lot of misinformation out there, and it does skew people's judgment on things. Like I've got, I'm not going to say a lot of people, but I've got a handful of people that have come on to me personally, usually when they're pissed on a night out, asking me, should I go vegan? Should I go vegan? Is it going to be better for losing fat? I'm like, where did you hear that, man? And yes, you have the whole Game Changers thing. When people watch that, it's like, right, I'm going to go vegan now for sports performance. And I don't think not many of my friends anyway, because they can kind of see through the hype, but they'll entertain the thought a little bit. Got a few of those questions, like, but I think they knew, it's a bit of hype, it's a bit of bullshit. But again, there's no one. If we get a client coming to us that's set on for health reasons or thinking that's going to be better for fat loss, it's just an educational thing, and then they can make their decisions then from there based on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you actually look at the effort that's involved in, you know, making a vegan diet as close to an omnivorous diet as possible, a lot of the time it's not worth it. And so if you're doing it for these reasons that maybe aren't backed up by your own ethics, like, and that's the thing, like, your ethics will govern whether it's worth it to you or not. And for me personally, it is, but I've got the advantage that I'm also a nutritionist and, you know, have a good grasp on the nutrition side of things, which is where the difficulty lies. But then if you're not a nutritionist and, you know, maybe your ethics aren't the reason why you're doing it and you're doing it for health reasons or whatever, then you'll probably get to the point where you're like, well, actually, it's not actually less healthy for me to include some dairy. And it's not actually any less healthy for me to include some fish or what. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, I'm just eating the Blue Zone diet anyway. You know, it's plant centric. It's got some dairy. It's got some fish. It's got a little bit of meat sometimes. Like, but yeah, I mean, you mentioned the Blue Zone diet, and that is, in all the literature, the healthiest diet. And I mean, I do it in inverted commas because you don't actually know, but the people who live in those areas tend to live longer and have very similar diets. So it is observational, but you know, you can't really.
Is there a Blue Zone diet? I was actually on about the Blue Zones, but is there actually specific? I didn't even know that.
It's just the type of diet. It's just the type of diet they eat in those zones. So, you know, they've been seen to eat not particularly low fat, but not particularly high fat. You know, a lot of seafood, some meat, not much actual red meat. What else is it? Plenty of dairy. Like most of those places, you know, have quite big cheese culture and stuff like that. You know, yogurts and those sort of things. Plants. So, yeah, but that's the thing. It's heaps of plants, and it's also a bit of the culture around food. Like a lot of the places that have, you know, that fit into this Blue Zone, also, you know, have, you know, lunch breaks that are like an hour and a half long from work, so that they can sit and enjoy their food and don't have to just rush it. And they also have, you know, later meal times in the evening, which usually means people don't have much or anything for breakfast. And like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into it, but a lot of it's cultural. It's kind of like how, you know, in Spain, they have siestas and they just have a part of the time, part of the day where they just close everything. And that's when people go for their lunch break. And then they're not rushed to do anything. It's more relaxed. And yeah, it's not just a diet, but people have tried to, it's not marketed like the vegan diet. You know, there's no protesters out there going, eat the Blue Zone diet. But yeah, they've tried to isolate what the things are. But I think the more research you read, the more it comes down to the whole package. It's not just, you know, eating that diet. It's also living there and being in that culture and all that stuff.
And you mentioned the effort involved, and is that worth it based on your ethics? And then you're like, I have the added advantage of being a nutritionist. Yeah. But you said at the start, like you do struggle from time to time with hitting protein targets and stuff. And that's probably one thing I want to get into is, how do you make sure, because I know you're somebody that cares about this stuff and you do it, how do you make sure that you're getting enough protein and enough complete protein? And maybe maybe even explain like what is the difference between complete and incomplete for somebody who doesn't know what the hell we're talking about.
Yeah, so complete protein is a protein source that contains enough of all of the essential amino acids. And I say enough of them because most protein sources contain all the essential amino acids, but just not in large enough quantities for some of them. And the best example I can give here is if you look at a legume protein and a grain protein, usually they're deficient in the one that the other one is high in, which is why you get vegan protein blends that are usually rice and pea, because they've kind of done the research and found that pea protein is low in, I might get these backwards, so bear with me. But so rice protein is low in methionine, but high in theanine or something like that. And then vice versa for pea protein. They might be, low or high for the other one. But when you put them together, they have enough of each essential amino acid to be considered complete. You then have the digestibility, which basically means to get the same amount of protein into, or amino acids into your bloodstream, you need to eat more. So you kind of already done, the very simple part like that. That's what I give to my clients. Like that's the very basics, combine your protein and eat a little more. But then if you start diverging from those very basic proteins, again, you have to do this research, for that one and something to combine with it. So yeah, the way I personally do it is I eat a lot of soy because that's already complete. And if you can isolate it, so if you get soy protein isolate, for example, it's actually pretty close to whey. I think it's like 88% of there's a score. I can't remember what it's called. But there's basically a protein score.
Amino acid score or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the amino acid availability score or something like that. But yeah, it's like 88. Soy protein isolate is like 88% compared to whey protein isolate. So it's not too bad. So I kind of concentrate on a lot of soy options, and the more processed it is, usually the more bioavailable it is. Obviously, if you have just soybeans or edamame beans, which is pretty much the same thing, you also have like the other nutrients in there that are being contended with, and also there's fiber that's slowing down the digestion time and therefore the absorption time. And essentially you've got to get to the point where every decision you make around nutrition has to be really protein centric, especially for someone my size. Like I've got to get in a crap ton of protein per day. Like if I was eating just whey protein, for example, maybe I could get away with 200 to 220 grams a day. But eating less bioavailable sources and less complete sources, it's ending up being more like 300 grams a day, which, I mean, it's doable, but it's not, if you want abs and to get enough protein, that's not the way to go. There's definitely an amount of fat gain that comes with that, and I find I have to go through more cycles of intentional fat loss than I would like to. But again, it's within the realms of my ethics to do that, and to put the effort in, with the calculations and with the extra fat loss. I think the biggest thing, like if somebody was trying to work this out for themselves, is finding combined sources. And there's so many calculators online that can do this. If you just type in like the amino acid content of whatever food you're looking at, there's so many calculators that will help you combine them to try and find one that's, got enough of each essential amino acid. But there's also more and more research coming out all the time. Since I've been vegan, they had a pumpkin seed protein craze, I guess you could call it, where everyone was like, oh, it's the new complete protein. And I mean, it could be considered complete, but the bioavailability is not very high. And more recently, they've had potato protein, which is, again, pretty much complete. I mean, it's a little low in methionine, but not enough, not as low as like rice or pea, whichever one of those is low in methionine. And if you combine that again with something and just a little bit of something else, you can actually get, I think it's even higher on the amino acid availability score than soy protein isolate. So like there's new stuff coming out all the time. I haven't tried potato protein because, again, Germany is really far behind in nutrition. And now that the UK is not part of Europe anymore, shipping costs are astronomical. But yeah, so there's new stuff coming out all the time. But for now, I just recommend combining your proteins to try and create your own complete proteins, and then eating more than you normally would because of the bioavailability.
So you're saying that you have to eat a calculated kind of vegan version of 300 grams of protein to hit technically the 200, 220. Is that what you're kind of saying? Of exactly. Complete. Yeah. So that's going to bring a massive calorie load with it as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's why you're saying fat loss is harder.
Yeah, fat loss is way harder because to fit that in there and also have, like, if I only ate those foods that were protein centric, I'd probably be hitting my calorie target anyway, because a lot of those foods, especially for whole foods, are going to be things like lentils, which have a lot of protein, but they have more carbs. And, tofu has a lot of protein, but it has more fats. And so to just hit those targets with relatively whole foods straight away before I add, too many vegetables or anything for flavor and stuff like that, or just enjoyment, I'm going over what my maintenance calories would be anyway. So again, it's just a matter of recognizing that and having periods where I'll go through some fat loss. And I think the biggest drawback there for those fat loss phases is, normally I'd recommend that somebody increase their protein when they're going through a fat loss phase to try and maintain some muscle, which is not possible if you want to, like, I can't go up from 300 grams and down in calories. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. And have you you hear adding branched chain amino acids or adding leucine to meals if you're a vegan. Have you ever toyed with that, or is it flawed in any way?
The branched chain amino acids is fine. Like, basically, they're really good ways, and the things I do on cuts is if you have something that's low in one of the branched chain amino acids, for example, you can just include BCAAs with whatever you're eating, and it kind of combines it by itself. You've got to be aware of things like the amount you're getting. Some BCAAs are pretty low, even on those branched chain amino acids, because they're not really meant to be like a replacement for a whey shake, for example, which also includes a lot of BCAAs. They have now my protein. You're
missing bits in the BCAAs. That's what people don't realize. You're missing other stuff, basically.
Yeah, and you can also get, like, if you just worry about amino acids, you can also get essential amino acid supplements, which have all the essential amino acids. Again, do they have them in enough quantities? It depends what you're pairing them with. Leucine is a big one because leucine is kind of low in grain protein. So a lot of people will have whatever they're having and then have some additional leucine. Apart from tasting like shit, it's kind of one of those ones where it's never usually just leucine by itself that's missing. And when they do studies on, like, matching leucine content, so my favorite study to bring up, because it demonstrates it really well, is they compared wheat protein isolate versus whey protein isolate. And they compared them, gram for gram of protein, and whey protein isolate killed the wheat protein isolate as far as muscle protein synthesis, obviously. Then they matched them both for leucine content, which meant having 30 grams of whey versus 65 grams of wheat protein isolate. And so both having the same amount of leucine, and therefore both hitting the leucine threshold and initiating muscle protein synthesis the same. And there were crap tons more amino acids in the blood from the wheat protein isolate, because there are crap tons more amino acids trying to get through and waiting for that leucine key. So it can be helpful. Like, if, for example, you're going to use wheat protein isolate, which is essentially what they make seitan out of, and a lot of other vegan protein options are made of wheat protein isolate. Well, then you can have leucine with that, and it might help get some more of those amino acids into the bloodstream. But again, it's never usually just leucine that they're low in. So going with an essential amino acid supplement might be better.
Yeah.
And in fact, BCAAs I pretty much don't recommend to anybody unless they're vegan, because I think they do have a bit of use there. And I think for someone trying to lose weight, they can be pretty helpful. And maybe, you know, they help you maintain 1% extra muscle mass, but it's still enough that I consider it would be worth it.
But even after all that, like, you can see the level of detail that might need to be looked at.
Yeah.
That's fucking hard. Like, even for, like, if I was to do that, I can imagine the barriers and the struggles I would have if I just tried to start doing that next week, for example. Because I do think people, if they are changing things, they jump into them fairly quick. Like, it's rare I'll hear people doing tons of research and then making an informed decision. Usually they just dive headfirst in, they'll tweak as they go along. And I know people that are quote unquote vegan, but their diets are just terrible, and it's all highly processed vegan stuff. Do you know what I mean? But like, basically, I suppose, just to sum up the whole protein thing, what we talked about there, because I even lost half track of all the figures you were spitting out at me, is that in order to get, we'll call it a full protein just for easiness sake, in order to get a full protein, or a full protein day, if you're a vegan, it requires work.
Yep.
If you ignore that, and if you just kind of go about your day as normal, grand, you're eating good quality food, plant-based diet, everything should be fine, but you're not going to be hitting the protein that you need. And if you're someone that trains, or if you're someone that cares about muscle mass, and ladies, for you, understand this is muscle tone, like, you're going to limit yourself in that realm. And you're also going to limit yourself for other things that people don't foresee, which is strength and health and longevity later in life, you know. And that's a huge part of it, I think, as well, that people just don't adhere to enough, or they don't look into enough, and they lack the protein that they need.
It's funny because the same things I would recommend, the same type of person I'd recommend a vegan diet to, if they just wanted to change to a diet that would easily help them maintain their body weight, I would usually recommend either vegan or keto if that was something they were interested in, right? And the reason, the type of person I would do that for is somebody who doesn't have a body composition or a performance goal. And that goes for both of them equally, but for different reasons. You know, for the vegan diet, it's due to the, you know, complicatedness that you need to put in, if that comes with it, if you want to do any performance goal or any body composition goal. There's all the complication that comes with it, so I wouldn't recommend it to someone for that reason. And likewise with the keto diet, you could easily maintain your body weight on that if you didn't have a performance goal. But again, if you have that performance goal, I think the keto diet probably not the best option, and the vegan diet probably too much work. And I think that's one thing that a lot of coaches get stuck on, is because of that, they just don't recommend it at all. But if that aligns with somebody's, you know, either preferences or ethics or whatever, and they don't have a goal that's going to, you know, make that really hard, they're still great options. You know, they're easy to adhere to, because as much as a lot of people try and like poo-poo the whole restrictive diet or restricting a whole group or whatever, for a lot of people, that's the easiest way to go. Like, they don't want to track their macros. I want someone to say, it can be easy enough to say, right, if your ethics mean you don't want to eat meat anyway, then maybe a vegan diet is a good option for you. Or if you're, you know, not interested in carbohydrates for whatever reason, you know, they're not the kind of foods that get you going, but you really like eating meat, then maybe a keto diet's good for you. And it's, I think every type has their drawbacks, and every type has their advantages for different people. And I do think that any type of diet really can get a bad rap, unless it's the diet that person is particularly biased towards giving. And for most people in the nutrition industry, it's going to be some sort of flexible diet that includes foods that you like and blah, blah, blah. But for a lot of people, that's really hard to, if you're told you can eat everything you want in whatever quantities you like, and then it's your choice whether that fits your body composition goals or not. For a lot of people, that's just crazy decision fatigue straight away. Like they're like, fuck, can't you just tell me what to eat? And, for a lot of people, those, and people like us have probably said, don't bother about the keto diet, for example. There's better ways you can lose fat, but there might not be easier ways for that person to lose fat. It might be really easy for them to just go, cool, I just don't eat carbs, done. Like for that person, it's super easy. And we've talked them out of it. And now they're still struggling to lose weight because they're, finding it really hard to make the right decisions. And, eating carbs makes them feel like they need to eat more carbs or whatever the case may be. Or to them, carbs might have just meant chocolate and ice cream. And now we've told them they can eat that and they can't stop,
Yeah, I think it definitely comes down to the coach and the coaching style that they're given, because I think you see it now with younger coaches that might have done a weekend nutritional course online or something like that, that they're classifying themselves as nutritionists and they're giving people calories and macro targets. And they're like, right, here's your calorie targets, here's your macro targets. It's day one, off you go, track them, eat what you want, fit it in, done. And it's like, yes, there's so much learning curves there, and there's so much things that can go wrong. Like it's just, it's an arseways way to go about it. Like it's why, like we have a full structure here. Like when we take on someone, we start them super slow. But we also leave the ball in their court that if they want to push it a little bit faster, they can. And what they realize is by changing one little thing, they're actually end up changing 5 things without even realize it, but they're focusing on the one thing. And then we build that. Like we mightn't get somebody looking at calories and macros until week, at least week 5 to anywhere from week 5 to week 12. They might only start at that point. And then we still only start slow there. Like, and we'll still get clients that are just like, look, I'm finding this hard. Can you just give me a meal plan? We actually had that scenario last week, and it requires a bit of work then on our behalf to be like, right, given random generic meal plans is not in our ethos. We don't want you just to follow a meal plan and stop at the end and then regain the weight because you hadn't learned anything. So there's an intensive learning and coaching experience behind doing what we do. But I do hear you in that, a vegan diet because of the ethics, and it might be easier to follow because maybe your partner does it as well. And they're all factors to consider. But I think one thing I want to make clear as well is that I'm not trying to say that a vegan diet is super hard and impossible to do. Let's make that clear. I don't want to be saying that, because it is possible and it is easy to do. I have beef with people that fucking push it on people for no reason, other than a marketing gimmick or for them to make money or whatever it is. And that shit boils my blood, man. But I think we've hit the protein nail to death. What about supplements? Do you take much yourself?
Yeah, I take, I probably still take less than a lot of people who aren't on a restricted diet. So I take vitamin B12. I take vitamin D, but that's just because of where I live. And I've been locked inside for 6 months. I take an omega-3 supplement.
Yeah, your hair looks fair. Your hair looks fair white, man. It's the light.
It's the light. I mean, the problem is the only lights in here are behind me, so I have to have this little desk light, and like I can make it more orange, but it's really it goes really. That's even worse.
Yeah.
Really white. Yeah. So B12, omega-3, vitamin D. They're the ones I take at the moment, and I usually just monitor my blood work, which I get done probably every 6 months. And if I notice something's getting low, I'll supplement with it. But I just try and make sure I'm getting a good micronutrient profile through what I'm eating. If I go into like some sort of calorie restriction, and I know that's going to lead to some deficiencies in there, I'll probably preempt that with just a multivitamin. Because in most cases, multivitamins are good enough to hit your basic micronutrition need if you're also eating some real food with it. And like other things, like for example, I'll always use iodized salt so that I don't have to worry about my iodine intake. But you could also get that from things like seaweed. And obviously, if you eat seafood, if you're pescatarian or whatever, you're already getting that anyway. So a lot of stuff I just manage with my nutrition. And they're just, omega-3, vitamin D, vitamin B12 are the big ones that I can't manage with nutrition. I also, on top of that, also take creatine, and we'll usually have some sort of protein powder each day. But I mean, they're not for nutritional reasons. They're just because I want to be jacked.
Yeah. And so we touched on protein. We touched on the ethics behind it all, supplements. What would you say, like, where do people, or what do people need to look into if they are considering a vegan or vegetarian diet for ethical reasons? Where would you even start with giving a generic advice for them to consider?
So I would say the best way to go is to start slowly. Like, a lot of people try and go cold turkey, and they haven't got any like infrastructure in place. If you just go straight from a normal omnivorous diet to going fully plant-based or fully vegan, it's kind of hard to know, what the good alternatives are. If you do it little bit by little bit, you kind of learn piece by piece. So if you start replacing, meat is probably the obvious first one. If you start replacing meat with, either meat substitutes or things like lentils or tofu or whatever, you've probably gone through a bunch of different varieties before you get to, right, I'm going to start replacing dairy now. Or vice versa if you want to do dairy first. But it's easier than trying to learn it all at once, to do it a little bit at a time. But the biggest consideration I would make is if you have a body composition goal or a performance goal, if you actually want to put in the extra time and effort, like if you've tracked food before, like if you tracked your macros before and you didn't really enjoy it, or started to make you hurt your relationship with food or something like that, then I probably wouldn't recommend it if you have a performance or body composition goal. If you simply just want to, go vegan for your ethical reasons, and, whether that increases or decreases your body fat a little bit, it won't be much anyway, but a little bit doesn't bother you, then, I mean, it's pretty easy. Just stop eating animal products. But, if you wanted to make sure that you're still maintaining some sort of body composition or performance goal, then yeah, there probably needs to be more thought in it. And for both camps, I would say get your blood work done, keep an eye on it, and just supplement or fix with your nutrition whatever you notice in your blood work is the biggest thing. Because a lot of people go from like an iron-rich diet to an iron-deficient diet or something like that, and then don't take a supplement or don't get the blood work done.
Yeah, brilliant, man. And we take a similar approach for our clients that are vegan, because usually we'll find that they're already doing it for a long time, and they do have a performance goal. Well, I think nearly all of them do have a performance goal, because again, they're here to progress and get stronger and get the most from their training. Because it's kind of like, why not? Why wouldn't I do that? Because I'm putting in the work, so why not try and get the most out of that? And the second thing then is that we just fine tune it. So really, we look at the protein intake, and we'll give simple guidelines around, here's what we can do, here's how to make it better. Let's do it smartly. Let's make sure that we're ticking our boxes with our supplements, and then we'll just track. And it's, then it becomes something that we're not hyping up to be this massive thing, and it's part of their life and whatnot. So I think that's a large part of it too, though.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, when I say performance and body composition goals, I pretty much mean that elite or like super optimal level. I'm talking more about people who are either athletes or bodybuilders or whatever, and the people that need that final 1 or 2%, they're the ones who are going to struggle. If you just have like I want to maximize my strength, but also, adhere to my ethics, then it's definitely ways you can follow a vegan diet and still do all that. And it's exactly what you just said, taking a smart approach like that. It's literally just the people who have that, need that 1% of everything that are going to find it hard. Like trying to be optimal with the vegan diet, I mean, it's not optimal for most of the things. It's not optimal for muscle gain. It's not optimal for performance. Can you do those things and be have a suboptimal diet? Hell yeah, you can. People do it all the time. Like, it's no less optimal than most if it fits in macro diets. It's no less optimal than a lot of normal omnivorous diets. Again, it just comes down to where you put the effort in. A lot of people have to put effort into changing their omnivorous diet to get those extra 1% as well.
Brilliant. And I have a couple of listener questions. This can vary from coaches' questions that we have here to clients' questions, even friends' questions. If I'm like, I have such and such in the podcast this week, so that they vary. First one is, and it's probably a bit of a myth, but it was a genuine question. How's your sex drive now compared to when you weren't a full-blown vegan?
No different at all.
Myth,
it pretty much made no difference. And I was actually, like I said, I was getting my blood work checked and I was looking at things like my testosterone level and stuff. And there was no discernible difference. Like if they did a study on me, they wouldn't have had any significance at all.
Brilliant. So again, like even though like this person asking that, he asked me first, he was like, does he have good boners now? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, ask him, does he have good boners? And I was like, what? He goes, well, ask him what's his sex drive like now.
Well, that actually comes from Game Changers, because they did that experiment with Game Changers. They put like a ring around the guy's dick as they went to sleep, and then tried to check how big and how many erections they had during the night.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I didn't. Yeah. I watched like 10 minutes of it. I was like, no, I'm not fucking putting myself through this. No, I just turned it off.
It's it's a complete myth. Anything they found in that study, none of those studies in that mockumentary are actually published anywhere, because they don't actually qualify as studies. You can't just do it one night and then go, cool, here's our findings. That's not how a study works.
Yeah. We could get into a whole other loophole with that. Like, good question here. Actually, is your partner vegan?
No, she's full-on meat-eating savage.
And how do you manage that? Does that affect you in any way?
No, I mean, in the exact same way as it's my choice and my decision to not eat animal products, it's her decision and her choice to continue to eat animal products. Like, I'm not a dick about it though. There's plenty of vegans out there who would be a dick about it. Like, I like to use the example, like if I go to her family's house for Christmas and they're like, hey, do you want some of this apple pie or something? I'm not going to be like, hold the fuck on. Did you put butter in this? I'm not fucking eating it. Like, I'm just going to be like, yeah, sure, thanks. And get over it.
It's funny because I had this conversation with a guy that he didn't live with him, but he's good friends with him I'm not going to say where, because if I say where, and if someone's listening, they're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. So basically his wife is vegan, and she pushed it on him. And I was like, okay, where's the story going? And it was his friend. It was his friend telling me this, by the way. When that friend was away from his wife, when they were like, I don't know, doing shit together, if they're gonna, like, if two lad friends were going out for a meal, for lunch or something, your man would eat as much protein as he could whilst he was away from his wife. And I was just like, that's not fucking healthy, man. Like, he was the example of, we went for lunch and he was literally stuffing himself with chicken wings just to get in protein because he hasn't eaten it in so long. And I think that's a relationship thing as well. But like, that's not healthy. And that's where I'll say it again. That's where I have beef with people who push fucking things on people. You should not be pushing like your ethics or your ways of doing things because you believe it's better. If that, like, it's just, man, it opens up a whole can of worms, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you live in a country that's been divided by people pushing their religion on each other. There's no different to that. Like, just let people do what they want to do and don't bother them. Like, that's, whether you really believe in something or not, that's your choice. Leave everyone else alone.
That's some life advice right there, man. Anything you want to leave people with in terms of anything you felt we haven't touched on that's an important point to leave on?
No, I think the big things that are hard to do on a vegan diet we've covered it. You know, your micronutrition, your protein, they're the big things. You know, just find where your line is probably the biggest thing. Like for some people, they might want to go vegan, but actually when they weigh up, you know, their muscles versus not eating any protein that comes from animals, maybe they value their muscles more. And, you know, vegan might not be the best option. Maybe vegetarian is, maybe pescatarian is, you know, maybe full-blooded meeting savage is where your line is and you're happy there. Like it's your ethics and not my ethics, you know, whatever you're comfortable with, do that. And don't let Netflix documentaries or, you know, dickheads down the street throwing blood on fur coats or whatever they do, paint on fur coats, I guess, you know, try and tell you what to do. Just stick to your guns. And if you're interested in making change, do the research, listen to podcasts like this, or, you know, I got a YouTube channel where I have a whole playlist on like a vegan survival guide. You know, there's plenty of information out there, and, you know, just be informed before you make your own decision, and don't be like old mate who does it for his missus.
Yeah. That again, I'm just thinking about it here. I actually know probably two other people that are similar. Is like when they're away from them, they just eat protein with their friends, and it's just like, that's not healthy. Like, well, that's not healthy from a food relationship point of view or a relationship point of view. Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, you can't store protein beyond a certain amount anyway. Like once you've eaten enough protein for the day, your body just goes, cool, this is going into your poop. Like,
I don't think they don't care about that. They're just doing it because they haven't eaten it.
Because they love it.
Yeah. Nick, I will send, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but sending people to your Instagram page and YouTube channel will be in the show notes. Is there anywhere else you want to send people to find out more about you?
Nah, man. If people are wanting to find out information, YouTube's the best place. If they just want to find out about me, then Instagram's the best place.
Perfect. I will link all that up anyway. Nick, man, thank you very much for coming on. That was fantastic. And
you're very welcome.
Hopefully we'll be seeing you in person in the near future when this mess is over.
Yeah, well, I'm not holding my breath.